This book is a 5 out of 5 star, one of my new favourites. Life before death, strength before weakness, and journey before destination. I think it would be very hard for me to form a genuine and complete relationship with him because he's Zeus, you know? And I heard good things and I was like, I'll give it a go. And then I was like, oh, okay, cannibalistic mother. Oh. Hi, welcome to this video. My name is Rhianna and today I'm going to talk all about the books that I read in February. So on the channel I usually read a mixture of fantasy and literary fiction, and this month I especially read a lot of fantasy. I was craving just some escapism, some magic, some adventure, and I read a few really great fantasy books this month, and also a pretty good literary fiction as well. I read a total of 6 books this month, and that was 4 physical books, 1 Kindle book and 1 audiobook. And I'm going to talk about them in the order in which I read them. So let's get started. The first book I read in February is Mexican Gothic by Silvia moreno-garcia. So last year I read the book Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier and I loved it. It's become one of my new favourite books. I love the idea of a woman going to live in this mysterious house which is like misty and isolated, and the woman has to figure out the mysteries and uncover some secrets. Love that kind of thing. And this book definitely feels inspired by those kind of tales. It is quite similar to Rebecca, and that's because it very much follows a similar plot line. So in this book we're following our main character called Nomi, who is a young woman in her 20s, and she has a cousin, and her cousin recently married this man and she lives in the Mexican countryside with him near a small village and very much in an isolated area. And Nomi's father is worried about Nomi's cousin because she sent over a letter which makes her seem like she's gone a bit mad. So Nomi's father is like, will you go to the house and see if your cousin is alright, see what's going on. So Nomi's like, alright, I'll go. And she goes because her father promises that she goes, like, he'll let her go to university to study, I think, anthropology. She's actually kind of not sure what she wants to do and what she wants to be in the future. She feels a bit lost, and that's quite relatable. And so Nomi goes to this house where her cousin named Catalina is, and when she arrives there she immediately realises that the family in which Catalina married into is a bit odd. The husband, bit odd. The husband's mother, bit odd. The grandfather, also a bit odd. And the goal of Nomi in this book is to uncover the secrets. Why is this family odd? Why is Catalina seeming a bit not herself, a bit mad? What's going on? And I loved it. It was very compelling because I just wanted to keep reading to discover the secrets. And I wanted to read my favourite quote from each book that I read in February, and my favourite quote from Mexican Gothic is, "The world might indeed be a cursed circle. The snake swallowed its tail and there could be no end, only an internal ruination and endless devouring." And that quote relates to the idea of an Ouroboros, which I think is how you pronounce it. The Ouroboros is a snake which is eating its own tail, and it's very symbolic of the repetition of history and how nothing really is ever concluded. Life just goes on, and as humans we keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And that very much is a recurring motif throughout the story. The symbol of the Ouroboros turns up again and again, and that is because this story is also looking at deeper themes, as most books do. This book looks at colonialism, it looks at oppression, it looks at how wealthy people and people with power will use horrible means in order to retain that power. And I thought those themes were explored really well. Another thing I loved about the book was the main character. She wasn't annoying. So that's a plus. I think sometimes when you're reading a horror gothic story like this, sometimes the protagonist might walk into a situation that is obviously not a situation to walk into. Now the protagonist arguably does do this, but like she sleepwalks a lot, so it's not really her fault that she's doing that. And I felt like on the whole she was pretty smart, although maybe she should have left the house sooner than she did, because, you know, if I had sensed and seen some of the things that she had, I might have been like, you know what, I'm gonna go back to Mexico City, maybe this is not for me. I had such a fun time reading this book. I just love a story where there's just a mystery and it's gothic and the vibes are there, and so I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. Highly recommend if you love that kind of thing. The next book I read is an audiobook. I read Everlasting by Alix E.harrow. I read this because it had a lot of great things about it. that it was a fantastic fantasy story, a fantastic love story. And let me tell you a little bit about what it's about, and then I'll tell you my thoughts. So this book is about a historian named Owen Mallory, and he is really obsessed with this historical figure called Una Everlasting. Now you may think I've never heard of Una Everlasting, and that's because she doesn't exist in our world. So the world that Owen lives in is fairly similar to, I think, like a kind of 1940s, 1950s vibe, but it's very much its original own world. So it's not our world at all. When I first started reading, I was a bit confused because I was like, is this set in our world? And then it mentioned some stuff that I didn't understand. And I was like, oh wait, no, this is a fantasy world. And Owen is one day sent back in time to when Una Everlasting lived, which is like in the medieval times of this world. And he's a bit confused as to why he's there, but he gets to know Una, and then they get stuck in a bit of a time loop and they have to try and save the world. Now, what I loved about this story is what it was trying to say through the plot. So it looks at the idea of governments and people in power changing history to suit their own agendas. And I think that's a very relevant theme and an important theme to explore, because I think it is very common for people to manipulate history because they want to push a certain idea. And so that aspect of the story I loved, but I have to say that I didn't love the story, and that's, I think, mainly due to personal taste. And let me explain what I mean by that. I think time travel stories, maybe I'm learning, are quite hard for me to fully enjoy, and that's because I really like my fantasy to feel real, and I think it's quite hard to make time travel seem realistic, and this book isn't really trying to do that. The time travel is a really fun plot device in order to explore the theme, and it's not trying to make it believable in any way, which I don't think it should have tried to do, you know. But for me, I just think maybe time travel is not a trope that I love. Another thing about this book is that I didn't necessarily buy the romance between Owen and Una. I just thought that they wouldn't really work as a couple, because Owen views Una as sort of like a Jesus Christ type figure, or maybe we could equate it to maybe a Aphrodite type figure. She is someone he has read a lot about and that he views very much as like a god. And I just think that he's put on too much of a pedestal. I think if I went back in time and I met like Zeus, the god of lightning, I think it would be very hard for me to form a genuine and complete relationship with him, because he's Zeus, you know. But saying that, I did have a good time with it, and I think the reasons that maybe I didn't quite gel with it are definitely more down to personal taste than the book not working. And so overall I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. And a quote I liked is, "Let us lie here forever, let us be buried as wild things are by tooth and claw and worm. Let the grasses grow up through the sockets of our eyes. Let them find us in 7 years or 70, and let their brows furrow, because they cannot tell my bones from yours." Okay, next I want to talk about Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 3rd book in the Stormlight Archive, and I loved this book. So the Stormlight Archive is a series of 5 books, and each book is very long. Each book is over 1,000 words, so they are quite the commitment, but they're really rewarding. We follow a lot of different characters. Our 3 main characters are Dalinar, Kaladin and Shallan, and you really grow connected to those characters. You really know them well and understand them, and it's such fantastic character work. Also, part of the reason I love this series is because of the world. We are in the world of Roshar, and there are different regions of Roshar, and each region has its own customs and stereotypes. For example, a lot of the characters we follow are Alethi, and the Alethi people are known for dealing with problems through violence and fighting. There is another region of Roshar called Azir, and the Azish people are known for dealing with problems through counsel, through writing to their council and asking, you know, if they may retaliate. Also, the ending of this book is just so amazing. Brandon Sanderson's endings are just, it's so worth it. Also, like the end of part 3 of this book, wow, like crazy. And a quote I liked is, "10 spears go to battle," he whispered, "and 9 shatter. Did the war forge the one that remained? No. All the war did was identify the spear that would not break." I also love, yes, I began my journey alone and I ended it alone, but that does not mean that I walked alone. And I also really love the recurring slogan in this book, which is life before death, strength before weakness, and journey before destination. Okay, next I read two fantasy books. I read the 5th season and I read the second book, which is the Obelisk Gate. These are book 1 and 2 in the Broken Earth trilogy. So the third book is A Stone Sky. I have yet to read. I'm going to read it in March. And let me talk a bit about these books. So first I want to talk about the 5th season. I loved this book. This book is a 5 out of 5 star, one of my new favourites. And this book is quite hard to describe. What I knew about this book before reading it is that it was about a woman who lived in a fantasy world, and she is married with 2 children, and at the beginning of the story her husband kills her son and then kidnaps her daughter, and the protagonist, the woman, has to then go track down her husband and her daughter in order to bring her daughter home. Now that is what the book is about, but it's about so much more than that. The world is one of my favourite aspects of this book, which kind of surprised me because I am a big fan of traditional fantasy and not necessarily sci-fi fantasy or post-apocalyptic fantasy, and this I would say falls into the category of sci-fi and post-apocalyptic fantasy, but I still loved it because the world is just so imaginative and creative, and I really liked how N.K. Jemisin, the writer, didn't explain things to you. To be honest, the first 100 pages of the book, I was like, what is going on? I don't understand. And I wasn't like loving it the first 100 because I was like really like, I don't understand. The prologue especially, I was so confused. I could not grasp the prologue. I understand it more now, having finished the book. But yeah, it is quite complicated. But once I got past the 100 page mark, I was still like unsure about some of the aspects of the world, but I understood enough about the world to like fully settle into the story and not get frustrated by my confusion. And also I love books where the world isn't clear and you're trying to discover what actually everything means. It reminded me of I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman, and kind of Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, in the sense that when I read those 2 books, part of the reasons I love them, and they're some of my favourite books of all time, is because I didn't know what was going on and I was compelled to continue reading to try and discover the answers. And I felt similarly when reading this book. I read it so quickly because I was like, I need to discover what is going on. And some of the really creative aspects of this world are that there are these origin people, and origin people have the power to start earthquakes and also stop earthquakes, which is very important because in this world earthquakes are quite common. Now you'd think that people would really revere these origin people, however they really look down upon them and oppress them and sometimes kill them because they are afraid of them because these people can start earthquakes. And my favourite quote is, "Home is what you take with you, not what you leave behind." So my camera just died and I realised that it deleted the footage at the end of the video, so I'm going to continue and pretend that didn't happen. So I was talking about the 5th season, amazing book, 5 out of 5, and I loved it so much that I picked up the second book straight after. I went out and bought it, and this is the Obelisk Gate, and I have to say that I didn't enjoy this one as much as the 5th season, so I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. And the main reason I didn't enjoy it as much is because it was just quite slow. So the 5th season, we have 3 main characters and a lot happens in each of their storylines, and in the Obelisk Gate we're following 2 main characters, and both stories not a lot happens. For example, at the end of the 5th season, there is quite a significant line and a suggestion of what's going to happen next, and at the end of the Obelisk Gate the line is very similar. So yeah, it just felt like it was taking a long time to get to the drama, and I still enjoyed it because I do love the world. It's very imaginative and interesting, and we learn new parts about the world, but I felt like as well in this book that was done in a way of explaining things to us, and it felt like very much in the 5th season it was that you as the reader had to figure things out yourself. I will say though that the things I did like were Essen, the protagonist. I really loved her in the 5th season, and you learn more about her and her relationship with her daughter in this book, and so it just adds more layers to her character, and because you know her so well from the 5th season you can really understand why she makes the decisions that she does. And I think I'm going to really love the 3rd book, The Stone Sky, probably like I loved the 5th season, because I think it probably the drama is going to get going quite quickly. But yeah, unfortunately for this one I just did find it a little bit slow. But I think perhaps when I read the final book my perspective might shift, because I think then I'll be able to see the story as a whole, and it might change my perspective on the Obelisk Gate, potentially. Okay, and the last book that I read in February is a literary fiction book. It's called The Lamb by Lucy Rose. This was a really interesting little book. This book is from the perspective of a young girl. I don't think we find out how old she is. In my mind, she's like maybe 12 or 13. And the author does a really good job of making you believe that the story is from the perspective of a young girl. Her narrative voice is really unique and really enjoyable to read from. I loved her as a character. And she lives, this young girl called Margot, she lives in Cumbria in a house with her mother, which would maybe seem quite normal, except for the fact that her mother is a cannibal. And I did enjoy how this novel used cannibalism as a metaphor for parental abuse. So, of course, her mother, Margot's mother being cannibal, is not a very nice person. And it really affects Margot both mentally and physically. And although the story is about cannibalism, it's more about how a parent who is not a nice person can really affect you. And so I think the two great things about this book are the protagonist, Margot, and also the use of cannibalism as a metaphor. I think also the atmosphere it creates is really great. It's very much like this isolated, misty, gothic folklore type vibe. And I think this story feels like it would really work being told around like a campfire at night time. It's very unsettling. But I think overall I did give this book 3 out of 5 stars, and that is because I'm not sure if cannibalism is really a thing I like to read about, because I'm very squeamish and I get really involved in the stories that I read. And so this book really did make me feel very sick. I unsettled my stomach, and I'm not sure I enjoyed that experience. So I think I probably won't read a book about cannibalism again if I can help it. To be honest, I didn't really know this book was about that, because I love going into books knowing nothing, and this was 99p on Kindle, and I heard good things, and I was like, I'll give it a go. And then I was like, oh, okay, cannibalistic mother. Oh. And I really like the quote, "The absence of love had spoiled something in their souls and mind. Our love was rotten, but still looking for the burning it craved, for anything to revive the embers that had gone out long ago." So my camera just died, so I'm just going to film the end bit on my phone. I wanted to add the books in order from my favourite to my least favourite from the month. So my favourite was probably The Fifth Season, then Oathbringer, then Mexican Gothic, then The Everlasting, then The Lamb, and then The Obelisk. So very much bookended by the two N.K. Jemisin books there. I also thought it'd be quite nice to talk about the things that I've done in February. So in February, I have been working. I also visited Oxford. It was my first time visiting Oxford. I grew up in the southwest of England, but I'd never been there before, so I thought that it was time that I went there. And it's a really lovely city. I really like the Bodleian Library, although you can't go inside, I believe, without a card, because I was watching people go inside and they all seem to have some card. I guess they are students of Oxford University, which I'm not, but it looked cool from the outside. I also went to see a play in Oxford at the Oxford Playhouse. I watched Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf by Edward Albee. This was one of my favourite plays when I was a teenager, and I still do really enjoy it. I think it does dialogue exceptionally well, but I do think that it is a little bit dated. It is a bit of a kitchen sink drama set in one location, and sometimes I do crave for theatre to just be a little bit more experimental, a little bit more surprising, and maybe for some audience is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is quite surprising, but I think because I'm quite familiar with the play, it wasn't something different for me, and the play is really long as well. It's over 3 hours, so it was good. Maybe not my favourite. Another thing I've been doing in February is I've been trying to practice more Turkish. So Turkish is a language that I've been trying to learn for a while because my partner is Turkish. I could say a little bit in Turkish maybe to practice. So bu ay Türkçe praktik yaptın. Her gün ödev yapıyorum. Mesela dün Bursa hakkında yazı yazdım. Bursa İstanbul'a yakın çok güzel bir şehir. Bursa'ya birkaç kez gittim. Bursa'ya çok seviyorum. Okay, so that was some Turkish. Struggled through it a little bit. I think my issue is that I have to really think about it, which I suppose is a big challenge when learning another language, but I think it's very important to practice every day. Odemle Ulan Hurgun Praktikapiorum. Also in February I went to see Wuthering Heights in the cinema, which there's been a lot of discussion about online. To be honest, I think if you view the movie as like a companion piece to Wuthering Heights rather than a direct adaptation, I think it's fairly enjoyable. I think someone said online that it should have been called Kathy, the movie, and I think that would have been a good idea actually, because yeah, the movie is really, Kathy is the protagonist, you know, and in Wuthering Heights, the book, she is not there for some of it without giving any spoilers. And yeah, that's February. So thank you very much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. What did you read in February? What was your favourite book? And I'll see you in another video soon. Bye bye.